Great to be here. Thank you for having us. Jay was the unlucky person who could not get out of DC yesterday, so he's from the West Coast and he's at least on the East Coast, but he couldn't make it. So Jay's our chief scientist. Jay has a fantastic background. He's a visionary in the field. He was a fellow at IBM, a CTO at IBM, and both Dell. And one of his claim to fame is he contributed to the copyright and patent on RAID 6. So when it comes to storage, he's got an amazing mind and amazing vision. So Jay, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you rip.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I didn't hear most of that, but thanks for the intro. And I'm very excited. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I did try. I think there's a hotel room that I'm not sure we're able to cancel out of. So I think we're probably still paying for it, but we tried. I'm glad Dan is there. But nonetheless, we're very excited to tell you about Cloudistics and what we're calling a cloud software appliance. So let me take you through, do I have control here? Okay, here we go. So here are the key messages from my 30 minutes here today. You know, the first thing is the way we look at it, cloud is really not a place, it's an experience. And, you know, it'd be nice if we could change cloud to be an adjective instead of a noun. So you can get it on premises, you can get it hosted, or you can get it in the public cloud. And you'll see that from a Cloudistics perspective, we have focused a lot on the experience because that's our point of view on what it takes to be successful in this space. Public cloud is a great thing. Lots of workloads are moving to the public cloud, but we don't think that all workloads will be in the cloud someday in the future. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. You know, depending on who you believe, it's anywhere from 20 to 25% today. Depending on who you believe, it'll be 50, 60% by 2025. We don't think it'll be 100%. There'll be significant workloads running in data centers and in edge clouds. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Clearly, some workloads are going to be better in the public cloud. Others are going to be better on-prem. Our own view, and I think shared by a lot of people, probably a lot of you in the audience, is that in fact the future is multi-cloud, hybrid, etc. Cloudistics itself is a cloud software appliance. Our value add is in the software. We run on standard commodity hardware, but we ship everything together, the hardware, the software, and everything you need to be running your applications so you can be up and running in under 2 hours after the box is racked and cabled. So we are a private cloud moving in the direction of multi-cloud and hybrid. Some of those items are available now, others are in the roadmap, but that's our vision. So this, this next chart, I think, is pretty telling. It tells us about where we need to focus. You know, if there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of opportunity to get rid of complexity, and I think this is what Amazon has shown over the 12 years or so of its existence. You know, compared to a lot of players that are still thinking about infrastructure but have not really figured out how to simplify that management of that infrastructure. So we in Cloudistics, we're focused on the app, not the infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward here. So here is the agenda, and there's a reason for this agenda because when our founders started this company 3-4 years ago, it was driven by their own personal experiences. From their previous company, they were trying to set up a test and dev environment and do other things, and they started with the public cloud, ran into issues, started to move towards on-prem offerings, ran into a different set of issues, and then Cloudistics got created. So I thought I'd walk that same story with you because that really is how the company came to be. So let me start with a little scenario that I'm calling Cloudonomics here. And some of you will be quite familiar with the story, but I thought it was worthwhile because it really does share our experience as a company. So the little example I want to take you through is a little retail shop, a small growing business. It needs a few Windows virtual machines, and it begins its operation by running 5 days a week. And because of tight cash flow, they like the OpEx model. So they start with Amazon, and they run 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. And of course, there's no capital costs. There's a bunch of operating costs for the 10 VMs. You see on the right of that slide some assumptions about what kind of virtual machine they need, how much RAM they need, et cetera, how much shared storage, et cetera. And the numbers that you see here, I mean, this is sort of the reason why a lot of people start with Amazon. I mean, it costs less than $1,000 a month to get going for this company. And by the way, these numbers are straight from the Amazon, monthly calculator. And I just ran these numbers sometime in January. I've been doing this for 2 years, just tracking what their numbers look like. So I always refresh because these numbers change all the time. So these are pretty current numbers, and this is what it'll cost for this little company to run their 10 VMs. About $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year, very reasonable, and this is why they get started the way they did. Now, of course, if you run 24/7, if you forget to turn off your virtual machines at the end of the day and run them 24/7, it's a little bit more expensive. It's $3,200 a month. Still pretty reasonable, $36 a year. So then I continue the example here on the next slide. The company grows a little bit. They need 20 VMs instead of 10. The cost goes to $6,000 a month. But I introduce also a 5-year projection in gray. So you'll see that over 5 years, the cost is close to $400,000 for this small little retail shop. Now they expand to the West Coast. So they have 20 VMs on the East Coast. They have 20 VMs on the West Coast. And now the 5-year cost is, $800,000 or so. So it's starting to build up. The next is, because of the cost, they move to use of reserved instances on Amazon to bring the cost down. That saves them about $100,000 a year, and so they're at $666,000. Now, the company becomes more successful. So, their one shop becomes 10 shops. Their 10 VMs becomes 100 VMs. And now, if you look at the 5-year cost, that's pretty significant. Now we're talking $3.7 million for that one shop becoming 10 shops, with again assuming 50% of the VM's machine instances are using reserve pricing to get a good break. And even if I turn 100% to reserved instances, it's still over $3 million over the 5 years. And this is sort of the experience that our founders had. After a while, they really found that their costs were really very much more significant than they had thought it would be. Easy to get into, but costs can quickly grow. And this is fairly basic. I'm really not counting cost of backup and moving data around. Fairly simple, just run the VMs, 2 sites, 2 locations. Now, what would it take to do all of this on premises in your own private cloud. And you can see that you can save significant amount of money. Some of these numbers are obviously from our own product, but I show a range there because there's others that claim the same kind of cost advantages. And that number really includes, the hardware, the infrastructure software, in our case, all of the upgrades to the software over that 5-year period, the power, the cooling. We use a generalist rather than specialist to manage our things, and 5 years of service and support. So, really it's pretty inclusive. And even if you don't, if you think we've forgotten something here, you can see that the difference is pretty significant. And this is really what led our founders to start thinking about, can't we do better? We love the experience that Amazon is giving us, but we certainly don't like the cost, and there's some other issues. If you look at this next chart, the public cloud is great, but it isn't perfect. And, cost is certainly one issue. Others of you might be worried about lock-in. Others of you might be worried about compliance or where's my data, et cetera. And so it's great for many things. It's not perfect. And so what the Cloudistics journey was about, trying to replicate all of the good features down the left side, the agility, the low cost of entry that we just saw, the OpEx model, great scaling, all of those kind of things, without giving up on cost or performance or control. So when they came back and they started to move into the data center, this was sort of the state of the world. And the picture on the left, this is sort of the siloed way of the data center, where you buy your servers from Dell or HP, you buy your networking gear from Cisco, you buy your storage from EMC or NetApp, and kind of put it together. A lot of people still do things this way, and the main challenges are the high cost and the complexity of management. And so this is what the founders found. I mean, they did use VMware, they used EMC storage, etc. The picture on the right are the converged offerings that came out in early 2000s from Cisco with VCE and FlexPod, NetApp FlexPod, which solved at least the time to value, because you kind of got your server, your storage, your networking all together, integrated, pre-tested. But the costs and the management remained problematic. And I think this was true until things like hyperconverged came along. So I think of this first and second generation as focusing more on the hardware. This next generation with hyperconverged really focused on the infrastructure software, and they really did attack the cost and management issues quite well. And I think we're seeing the success of many of these companies that you see listed on this page. Some have been acquired, as you know. HP bought SimpliVity, and Cisco bought Path, and so on. Others obviously are doing very well on their own. And so I think I think the cost and management aspects were well addressed. I think there are other issues with the hyperconverged architecture. For those reasons, our architecture is not strictly hyperconverged. Because of the way the scaling works and the compute and the storage kind of go together, as that chain lock on the bottom of the chart is trying to show that you sort of scale these things together. There's other kinds of issues. It's not perfect, but I think it did go a significant way towards addressing and making it more likely that people will look at on-premise offerings as competitive to what Amazon and others provide in the public cloud. So when we started Cloudistics, that was sort of the starting point. Actually, this project probably started in parallel, but a few years behind some of the hyperconverged offerings. They were not widely available at that time. I think they came a little later. But if you look at what Cloudistics is, it's a full cloud software appliance. And we want to move the focus all the way to the apps. You know, the first and second generation, the focus was on hardware. Next, the focus was on infrastructure software. In our case, the focus is on the apps. And so we start with the hyperconverged-like picture. You know, you get your servers and storage, you get your compute virtualization. In our case, that chain lock is missing, as you can see on the right. We let these things scale independently. They're not tied to each other. So you get just as much storage as you want. You get the amount of compute you want. We don't tie them together. But in our opinion, you know, we don't want to, if you really want to focus on the apps, you've got to take care of more of the infrastructure. So in our case, the hardware that you get is not just servers to run your compute and your storage. You also get a pair of switches and routers. Again, it's all open networking and switches, and it's you know, commodity stuff. There's nothing special about it. But in our case, we want to make sure that we don't leave it to chance. You know, if our nodes need to talk to each other, our nodes need to talk to storage, we know what's needed, and so we provide what's needed. We also provide integrated the virtualization on the networking layer. So this is similar to VMware's NSX offering, except we do have a different way, a patented way of doing it, which is line speed type of performance. But it's that kind of capability, overlay networking that simplifies the application's ability to be agile, to be moved around, to be mobile without having to change network ports and IP addresses and all of that kind of stuff. And it's all integrated into the product. It's not something you buy separately with a different user interface and a different UI. It's all built in to the product. We feel that this is what it takes to make the hardware as invisible as possible. You've got to do these kind of things. On top of that, there's also software that lets you focus on things like multi-tenancy, metering, self-service, all the cloud-like attributes that we have grown to love, and an application marketplace. And so all of that stuff on the right is really part of what you get when you get Cloudistics. And it's our view that what we want customers to worry about is the stuff at the very top, which is the applications. And all of the stuff underneath it is really strong, really robust, really secure, really complete. But we worked very hard to make that part of it all as invisible as possible. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the idea is you bring this thing in, you plug it, you get it ready to go, and in 90 minutes, you should be able to start running your first application after the racking and cabling. And a lot of that can be done on our site before it even reaches the customer because, you know, we have the switch as part of what we sell. So what we want is kind of the performance and scalability that we were used to, you know, pre-hyperconverge with the converge-like offerings, but you want the cloud-like experience, and it's all about the apps, and that's kind of what Cloudistics is all about. So let me talk a little bit more about Cloudistics, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So what is Cloudistics? And you know, by analogy, I mean, this could have been Google or any of the other public clouds, but I think you know, we just picked Amazon here in this picture because people know about elastic block storage and elastic compute, and we've got, as you can see on the right, which is our Cloudistics cloud software appliance, all of the same kinds of things. So you're really getting everything you want, if you will, in a box, and then you've got two things to connect. You've got to connect to the internet, and you've got to connect to power. But if you look at the layers of what we have, we've got all the same layers. all the way up to the application marketplace at the very top. And in our case, we actually manage this offering as a SaaS portal. So it's actually managed from the cloud, which we think is one of the ways in which we really make this thing give you a cloud-like experience. So there isn't a separate set of compute nodes to run a portal. It's all in the sky. We let you, new software upgrades are pushed and automatically taken care of. Remote debugging is possible. And the whole thing can be managed without any specialist. So a generalist can manage all of this stuff. We have separate roles. We have a role for the person that just manages the apps. There's a separate role for managing the infrastructure, which can be a simple generalist, but we make it so simple that the customer can do it or we do it for you. So one of our partners can manage the infrastructure for you and the customer just manages the apps. So in that sense, it's very much like the public cloud. So we like, no hardware management. We rapidly deploy apps. It's also multi-tenanted, just like the public cloud is. So if you're a large corporation and you want to carve up for your different departments, different functions, or you're an MSP and you have multiple clients, the same cloud software appliance can be used. We provide the multi-tenancy with that. Now, there's a lot of innovation in these layers of the stack. I mean, we're not using traditional techniques. I already mentioned that the way we do network virtualization, for example, is different. That was important to make sure we get line speed performance. So if you have a 100 gig physical network, I want to make sure that the 100 gig virtual network that's layered on top, you're not losing performance because of that virtualization. The way we do scaling of our compute and storage, this is all scale out, but we do it in a clusterless way, not using traditional techniques of clustering. Again, I don't want to get too much into the details, but the reason for doing some of those things is to avoid some of the limitations of clustering. So if you really want to scale beyond 32 or 64 or whatever a number of nodes you want, which many clustered systems have that kind of issue, we'll let you scale beyond while avoiding some of the traditional issues with clustering where you could lose all the data in a cluster, and in our case, our architecture avoids those kind of issues. So there's a lot of sort of secret sauce in this picture in each of these different layers. And when we started out, there were times when we thought, our performance is so good, we use all flash arrays for our storage. Maybe that's our secret sauce, or, maybe it's the fact that we're actually very inexpensive relative to some of the other offerings. But at the end of the day, what we've discovered as we've talked to customers, if they bought our product and used it and are running it in production, what we're finding is that it's really the experience that customers really like. And that's been our number one focus. Performance is great, but it's below the experience. Cost is wonderful, but that's also below the experience. It's all about the experience. And what we're finding is the fact that this can be deployed so quickly. There's minimal hardware management. We can do proactive support. We see things are going wrong from our portal. We can fix things. Replacements can be ordered before you even knew there was a problem with one of your servers. We can do remote debugging. The fact that you don't need specialists, all of these kind of things are ultimately the reason we've discovered over time that that's what customers really like. So it really is the experience. I'm going to take a few minutes to go through a few of the core innovations of the product. I've alluded to all these, so I won't belabor any of this or get into any technical depth, but You know, the picture on the left kind of shows what a minimum system would look like. It's a 6U system. There's a 2U storage block at the bottom, which has up to 200 terabytes of usable capacity, not including our compression, dedupe, and all of those kind of data reduction technologies. If I throw that in, you know, depends on the workload, obviously. It could be anywhere from a petabyte to 2 petabytes, depending on if you get 5x or 10x or what on your data. But even without any of that, that's 200 terabytes. And we get about 250,000 IOPS with all of the encryption, dedupe, and all of that kind of capability. On top of that, you got the 2U compute block, up to 8 nodes there. If you want more, you add another compute node block and keep adding a node at a time. We automatically discover new hardware. So when the new hardware is plugged in, it's just discovered. And then we've got the network block. And the network block can support all of the compute and storage underneath it. It can support up to 5 compute blocks, multiple storage blocks, etc. So you can keep adding more storage, more compute. The storage can be added, you know, 1 flash drive at a time. There's 32 in that storage block below there. So that's sort of what the picture looks like. And then the SaaS portal is where all of this stuff gets managed. So if I think about how do we get the experience? You know, these were some of the things that were really important. The portal, having that in the sky, you know, not allowing for any need for hardware management, because when you get this thing, it's all properly connected, all the OS is loaded, our software is loaded, everything is there. And then we do software push upgrades. So in most cases, we can do upgrades remotely and non-disruptively to the customer. We can do remote debug. We have the app marketplace that we talked about. So you've got, you know, things like Splunk and Hadoop and other enterprise apps. There's a long list of apps that are part of our marketplace. Click and run, you know, and that's kind of the idea. The virtual networking, important to get agility for your application, security for your application, because we do things like microsegmentation, so you can segment the app. And then mobility, you know, we certainly support VLANs, which is the traditional way of doing stuff, but as you know, there's limited mobility that you can get with VLANs. VNets, with virtual networking, which is what we do, in addition to VLANs, gives you that mobility. We do the clusterless federation, which gives us better scaling and better performance than clustered systems. And we have true multi-tenancy, so it's not just that each customer gets their own separate set of hardware. Within, you can carve up the hardware and still isolate tenants within that in a logical way using our microsegmentation and other kinds of features. So as you add more tenants, there's no need to go muck with the underlying network ports and stuff like that, because we can do it all with the overlay networking. So those were some of the things that were really crucial to the experience. I mean, these are all innovations in their own right, but they're not, you know, we didn't do networking because, you know, we wanted networking. We did networking so that the experience for the customer was important. So I've got about one chart on each of those 4 innovations. The picture on the left here shows a FlexPod. And the picture on the right is really our Cloudistics marketplace. I mean, we're focused on the application. That's what we believe is important to the customer. We want to hide all that stuff on the left and make it as simple as possible. This is sort of a picture of our virtual networking. Again, I don't want to get into the details of how it works, but really you have the underlay network, which does not have to be changed as apps come and go. On top of that, you have the overlay network. That's the thing that can come and go, but you don't have to touch the physical network. You don't have to muck with the ports and all of that other physical stuff. And so you get the agility, you get the mobility, you get the security at your application level. And then finally, this notion of the logical multi-tenancy. And the way we do that, for those of you that have used VMware, it's sort of like VMware vCloud Director, where you can take a single cluster and then carve it up for multiple tenants. It's a similar kind of idea. You have these physical pools of compute and storage, which we call a migration zone. But then we virtualize these things into 1 gig RAM units, 1 gig SSD units, and 1 vCPUs, and then we create these tenants that have these virtual units in them. So we call them virtual data centers or VDCs, and you can have multiple tenants or multiple VDCs. And that's our approach to supporting multi-tenancy on this product. The way that we have a lot of flexibility in how you consume Cloudistics and how it's priced. You can certainly buy Cloudistics and put it on your own premises. A lot of our customers do it that way. And it's easy enough to manage. But if you prefer, one of our partners can manage the hardware for you, and you just manage the apps. We also offer a hosted way, and then it can also be consumed as a service. And similarly, in terms of how it's priced, you can buy it up front, or there's sort of a model that's similar to reserved instance pricing, where you pay a little bit up front and then you pay for use. And it's targeted more at MSPs currently. No reason why over time that couldn't be used more broadly, but today it's more targeted, at the MSPs. So I want to just come back to, there's a lot of technology here, but it's under the covers and it's all hidden. And at the end of the day, what we're finding is that customers are buying Cloudistics for these features. It's really the experience. It's the fast deployment. It's the minimal hardware management. It's the proactive support. It's the fact that I don't need a compute specialist and a VMware specialist and a Cisco specialist and so on. I just need a generalist to manage all this stuff. So I think I'm getting. I think I've taken about 30 minutes. Hopefully, I know we started about 9:30 or so. So I'm going to try and wrap up here. I want to come back to where I started with the public cloud, we are. Depending on who you believe, somewhere from 20 to 25% of workloads today are in the public cloud. And there's all kinds of estimates about the future, VMware's estimate, Lenovo's estimate. Some are more aggressive than others. I'm not afraid of throwing in my own estimate. I used to work in IBM research for a long time and used to go around prognosticating myself. So excuse my own estimate thrown in there, but I don't believe that we're going to see more than 60% in the public cloud. And I think that's because of a combination of things that you see there. First of all, the cloud experience on your own premises is improving with products like Cloudistics and others. And I think that will cause many workloads to use the private cloud and kind of get the experience that you're used to on the public cloud. And certainly on the public cloud, we talked about some of the issues with cost and compliance and performance. That'll be okay for some workloads, not so for others. And finally, I think, and I think many of you know this, I think many of our future workloads will need computing closer to where the data is getting generated. The idea that a self-driving car can take a video or a photo of a stop sign and send it to your main cloud and have that analyzed in time before you hit the intersection. I think those kind of things are examples of reasons why there will be more stuff at the edge. And so, if you assume 20% to private clouds and 20% to edge, that still leaves only 60% for the public cloud. So I'm fairly confident in my personal estimate there that there will be, there'll continue to be more movement to the public cloud, but it's not going to be the world is entirely in the public cloud. And the kind of considerations you have to take into account to decide where you place your workload, are these. I mean, if you have elastic workloads, clearly they belong in the public cloud. But more predictable ones can be done in the private cloud in offerings like ours. There are other considerations, the amount of data you generate, what are the other apps you're integrating with them, with your app, and are those other apps in the public cloud or are they on-prem? All those considerations, and there are obviously business considerations that will decide, what is your business policy regarding data outside a firewall? Do you like OpEx versus CapEx? Where's your end users and how far away are they from your data centers? All of these considerations obviously will play a role. So it's not going to be 100% one way or the other, is of course the point. So our summary here is that you'll have private, you'll have public, and clearly hybrid is an important thing, or multi-cloud is an important thing. We're seeing that, with what VMware is offering now on AWS. We're seeing that with Microsoft and what they're doing with the Azure stack. And we want to do the same thing. We have the Cloudistics private cloud software appliance, and we're beginning to connect it to many, many different public clouds for people that want to manage it all from that user experience I showed you with that screen, a simple way to manage it all. I talked about these migration zones. You'll have migration zones that are on-prem, and you'll have migration zones that are on AWS and other places, and you'll be able to manage it all. I mean, that's kind of our vision. We're a private cloud today, moving to a hybrid cloud, as I mentioned earlier. So I think this is my last chart. I mean, I think public cloud is great. I don't think it's perfect. I think the on-prem cloud experience is improving. Things like our application-focused appliances, cloud software appliances is emerging. Clearly, some workloads will be better one place, some will be the other, and customers will want that choice. And so the future is going to be multi-cloud and hybrid. So hopefully that's been a good introduction to you. I know Dan is there, and we'll be able to answer more questions for you. I miss the fact that I'm not there in person. Hard to gauge audience reaction when you're talking and you're not seeing the eyeballs, but that's the way it turned out. I really did try to be there. So I'll stop there and turn it back to all of you, Dan, and take it from there.